I'm with Galya Hall here in Jerusalem. Where are you originally from, Galya?
I'm originally from Cape Town in South Africa.
Now, and quite a number of years ago, you were doing volunteer work here. What were you doing?
So September 2004, I arrived in Jerusalem on a Thursday late afternoon, I'll never forget it, and to join Christian Friends of Israel as a volunteer. I came initially for 2 years, and I started off in my first year as the receptionist for the CFI headquarters. And after that, I actually moved into outreach, and I got very involved in one of the outreach departments called The Last Shall Be First, where we worked with war veterans here in all over Israel, actually, not just in Jerusalem. And these incredible Jewish men and women, by the way, who fought during the war, who joined the partisans, who hid out in forests, and who did whatever they can to defeat the Nazis, and who had the most incredible stories of survival, of bravery, lots of trauma as well. And we were able to come alongside them, document their stories, support them in whichever ways we could. During the Chagim, we would put on celebrations for them where they could come to our offices and have a nice party and really just grow in relationship and friendship. And we also helped the poor and needy in the land. So we worked together with Israeli social workers, where we would be sent cases of people who needed support with a wide variety of things. We would look at the cases, and if we had the funds, we were able to assist and support. So it was twofold. We were able to help directly to the people here in the land, and we were also able to partner and collaborate with Israeli social workers and the Jewish agency in that regard. So it was a really great experience.
I imagine you got to meet some very interesting people and heard some interesting stories.
I really did. Interesting, but also horrifying. I remember many times going home at night and struggling to settle and sleep after hearing the most shocking accounts of what people endured. I'll never forget a lady who still had her tattoo on her arm. She had survived Auschwitz, and she was a young girl, and what she went through, what she saw, what she was exposed to, what happened to her, nobody should ever have to go through. And just hearing about it was traumatic. So for her to have actually gone through it, she ended up jumping off a train and escaping, which is how she survived. A real hero. And there were many, many stories. And look, the thing is as well, we never forced people to speak. Some of the survivors, they didn't want to talk. And that was also fine. You got to respect people's wishes. For some people, it was too difficult to recount. But for other people, they wanted to speak. They wanted to have it documented. And I think it's important in this day and age. I mean, there's still a movement of Holocaust denial, where people still have the audacity to deny that it ever happened. And slowly but surely, the number of first-generation Holocaust survivors is dwindling. We're going to reach a time soon where we are only left with second generation. And while we still have these people with us, it's really important to let them speak and to document what they went through.
It's important to know the stories, isn't it?
It's essential to know the stories for historical integrity and historical clarity and for truth, so that we can come against the lies of these groups and these individuals who seek to claim that it never happened.
Was it an interesting time being here in Israel, and how long did you stay for?
I was here for about 4.5 years. It was a very interesting time. It was a time of personal growth, I think, in many ways, just personal spiritual growth, just really needing to rely heavily on the Lord and to focus on Him and to be filled with His supernatural love, because it's an amazing country, but it's not an easy place to live. It's the Middle East. It's a different culture that I grew up to, and it can be frustrating. It can be a hard place to be, but at the end of the day, it was a time of really growing in deep understanding of God's heart for this nation, both the people and the land, and allowing His truth and His heart and His mind to become mine. And that was a long journey, and still is a journey. And it was a fascinating time, meeting people from all over the world, seeing incredible places that we read about in the Bible. Never imagined you would be standing there. I loved it.
And then you went back home and got married.
Well, a bit more complicated than that, but in a nutshell, yes. I went back. I was in the UK for a bit. I've got family in Scotland, so I had a stint there. And then back to Cape Town, where I worked for the South African Zionist Federation. And then went back over to the UK, yes, where I got married. And we lived in Cornwall, in Wales, in Scotland, had 3 kids. Had another season back in South Africa, and then landed back here in Israel a few months ago.
Wow. So what were you doing with the Jewish people in South Africa?
So in Cape Town, I worked on 2 separate occasions for the South African Zionist Federation as the diplomatic liaison and media sort of person. So that was an immense privilege. I loved working in the Jewish community in Cape Town. It is a very special community, the most incredible people who have such a heart for helping others and for growing Zionism in the schools and building a real close relationship between the Jewish community and Israel. It's a very special community. And working for the Zionist Federation was amazing. It was hard work because sadly in South Africa we have a lot of anti-Israel rhetoric that isn't just sort of whispers in the public, but it's coming straight out of our government. You know, there's heavy anti-Israel policies in our government. You know, we've had the Israeli ambassador to South Africa been sent home on occasions. We've had the BDS movement, which sadly one could say really was birthed in our country. So I had a big job of basically coming against this rhetoric, and which is essentially speaking truth in the face of lies. And that was done in a multiple variety of ways, but a lot through writing articles to the newspaper, through conferences, through workshops, all different kinds of things. Just trying to also provide what we say hasbara, like advocacy material for the Jewish community, but also for the Christian community in Cape Town, so that people could be readily equipped to combat these lies. And that's something I must say that's very special about the Jewish community in Cape Town, is the very close working relationship between the Jewish and Christian community in Cape Town. There's great partnership and collaboration, and it was fantastic to be a part of that. I also worked for a different organization, WITSO, which I'm sure you're familiar with here, the Women's International Zionist Organization. So WITSO is the most influential social welfare organization in the whole of Israel. So there's not many Israelis that haven't heard of WITSO or WITSO, however people say it. And I spent some time working for WITSO South Africa. I worked as PA to the president of WITSO South Africa, but it was very much a multifaceted job. There was administration, but we were also very involved in outreach projects and in media and in Zoom meetings and getting guest speakers in. And really, it was the most phenomenal experience being part of a women's Zionist organization, and just the passion for Israel, the love for Zionism, the unapologetic stance as a Zionist organization in a day and age where, let's be honest, Zionism's like a swear word these days. And it was just fantastic to be a part of that organization.
Is there a good Jewish-Christian relationship in South Africa?
Very good, very good. It's one of the things that is actually, I think, quite unique and quite rare. I don't think it's something you see. You see good relationships in other countries, but the closeness and the almost like the intimacy of that connection, I think, is quite unique. There's very strong friendships between the communities. I mean, we did a lot of events together where, the Christian Zionist community would join up with the Jewish community, and together we would host functions and events and that kind of thing. I mean, pretty much every week I was in communication with pastors or Christian leaders. I mean, it was a very close working relationship. And also WITSO South Africa, obviously as mandate, is to support projects here in Israel, but also recognizes that in South Africa there are many needs in their own backyard. And so they linked up with pastor in a local township and created a sustainability project with vegetable gardens and all kinds of helping a soup kitchen. So there's daily, weekly collaboration and partnership and working together, which is amazing.
Well, is there a big Jewish population in South Africa?
Not as big as it used to be. It is dwindling. Many, many Jews in South Africa are making aliyah, are choosing to make aliyah, or are moving to other countries, and there's a variety of reasons for that. Sadly, it has to be said that there has been an increase in anti-Semitism in South Africa, and like I've already mentioned about the anti-Israel rhetoric and the BDS movement, has and does have an effect on Jewish businesses and Jewish families. And so, the community is shrinking in size. But I mean, we can't be disappointed about Jews making aliyah. So of course, we support that wholeheartedly.
Now you're back here in Israel. What sort of role are you taking on board now here again at CFI?
So it's amazing after all these years to be back at CFI. It's kind of full circle. So my husband Tristan is the new executive director for Christian Friends of Israel, and I will be obviously coming alongside him to support him in that role, but I will also be doing work as a spokesperson for CFI, also involved in media, and also involved in what we like to call external relations, where we are excited to see CFI, collaborating and partnering with other organizations in Israel, we already do that, but we would like to see that grow and also cross into other communities, like perhaps, collaborate more with the Jewish Agency or with Vitso, for example, because a lot of us share the same heart and similar vision to really build up this country and to really come alongside and support all the people that live here and to be friends to Israel. And so I hope to invest a lot of time and energy into liaising with other organizations and to collaborate as much as possible.
Will it be quite a challenge taking CFI forward?
Of course it'll be a challenge coming, into these positions. CFI has been going since the early 1980s. Ray and Sharon Sanders have been at the helm all this time and have done the most incredible, most sterling job. Ray and Sharon have been the most incredible, faithful leaders of this ministry. And it's a huge responsibility and a huge honor to be granted the opportunity to lead CFI. We have a lot to learn from Ray and from Sharon, and we will be learning a lot from them, seeking a lot of counsel and gaining insight from their wisdom and their experience. And at the same time, we're excited to hear how the Lord will speak to us and what's on His heart for CFI as we move forward. And so, yes, of course there'll be challenges, but it's mostly, we view it mostly as a huge blessing and a huge joy and a huge privilege to be afforded the opportunity to be a part of this incredible organization.
Will they still be staying connected with you?
Absolutely, 100%. Sharon is an essential part of CFI. She's got incredible giftings when it comes to her writing. I'm sure you've read many of her articles over the years, her teaching. She's a fantastic orator. And the Lord has deposited so much truth and insight into her heart that must come out. So Sharon will continue to play a pivotal role in CFI.
How did you become a believer, and why do you have a heart for the Jewish people?
So I became a believer about 2 weeks before I started my university career in Cape Town, which was pretty good timing on God's part, because I think we all know university can be one big party for some, and it probably would have been for me. I became a believer through seeing the change, first and foremost, in the life of my best friend at school, and seeing something tangible that could not be denied that changed in her life and in her approach to life. And I'll never forget being in a service with her where the only way I can explain it, whenever people ask me, the only way I can explain it is it was a moment in time where the concept of truth was personified in the person of Yeshua, of Jesus. And when you have truth in front of you, you can either run into the arms of truth or you can walk away. And I thank God that in that moment, through His grace and mercy, I galloped into the arms of truth and have never looked back. And the question about Israel, well, it's an interesting one for me. It didn't begin after I got saved. Actually, from the age of about 6 or 7, I had a very strong interest and love in the Jewish people in Israel. My grandparents lived in a Jewish neighborhood of Cape Town, and I used to cry every Friday because I wanted to walk with the Jewish families to shul, and I didn't know why I was crying. And these are the stories that my family tell me. And I think what happened was when I became a believer, it was almost like that fascination with it all almost was like purified, and I just received it was so clear in my spirit and in my heart, God's heart for this nation and for these people. And I love the verse where he says Israel, I don't do this for your sake but for mine, that my name will be glorified. And that's my biggest mission in life, is to see God's name glorified. And my heart for this nation and for this people, it's because I can see the words of God through the Bible being fulfilled. And I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of what God is doing. I want to share God's heart. It's so important that we are in step with Him, that we operate with His vision, with His sight, with His heart, with His calendar. And it's clear from any reading of the scripture that God is working out all kinds of end-time purposes through this nation and this people.
Is CFI making a difference in the land?
CFI is making a huge difference in the land. Just as Ruth came alongside Naomi those thousands of years ago. CFI is a friend to Israel in the spirit of Ruth. Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Ruth would not leave Naomi's side. Good times, bad times, she stuck with her. And that is the spirit of CFI. CFI is a friend to Israel as Ruth was to Naomi. CFI has been a steadfast friend to Israel. When the times have got tough, when there's been wars and rumors of wars and conflicts, CFI hasn't gone anywhere. The staff haven't gone anywhere. Stood firm. Will never leave the side of the Jewish people. And CFI is also very much a grassroots organization. Is very much about sort of behind the scenes, down in the deep, relationship building, one-on-one, real people, changing lives. And that really is fruit that remains. And there's no doubt that CFI has made a huge impact. But more importantly, CFI has aligned itself with the very heart of God, and I think that's the greatest impact of all.
What's your prayer as you move forward with CFI?
My prayer as we move forward with CFI, in a way, is simple, but in another way is very profound, is that it is very important that our wisdom or our opinions are second place, that it's always less of us and more of Yeshua, that God in His grace would impart to us His vision for this ministry moving forward in days that are very dark and where the hatred of Jews and the hatred of Israel is on the rise. We've just all heard in the news about this Jewish man in France who was brutally murdered by his neighbor. Why? Because he was Jewish. So we're living in very, very dark days. And my prayer is that God in His great mercy would reveal to us His plans, His strategy, His heart, His vision, His thinking, and that we would be able to take that forward, and that we would really be able to continue sticking with Israel just like Ruth stuck with Naomi.
What's your website for people who'd like to know more?
Website's www.cfijerusalem.org, O-R-G, all small letters.
Okay, Galya, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. It's been a pleasure to chat.